God said He named the stars, and He called them out by name.
In this study, we will be looking at the book of Revelation through the eyes of the New Jerusalem Temple.
And you've never heard anything like this in your life. So, as we're looking at the book of Revelation, we're seeing in Revelation chapter 14 an unusual statement. It's talking about people who are going to be on Mount Zion. It says, "And I looked, a Lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having the Father's name written upon their foreheads." We'd seen that number before, 144,000, and we understood that 12,000 were to be from each of the 12 tribes. And we need to understand what it is they're doing. Why are they there on the mountain? And what mountain are they on? They're on Mount Zion. Well, Moses had predicted that a war would come for the tribes of Israel. As Moses closed his statement to all of Israel in Deuteronomy, he was talking about a war that was going to come to pass, and the people of God were going to be from the tribes of Israel, and they would be on the side of the mountain, and that would be Mount Zion, and that mountain goes all the way down to where the Dead Sea is. Within this scenario, God had foretold to Moses that this rock was going to save them, and that was the foundation stone, which has the ability to move, and in the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, actually went down a tunnel from Jerusalem all the way down to the Dead Sea, and is able to burst open the pit of hell as well. So the war is going to take place as the tribes of Israel are upon this mountain. Across from them will be the king of the Kiddim, and that's where the country of the Jordan is. And along with this war are all the parties of Psalms 83 war that had agreed to take out Israel, saying, "Let them be no more." So when we go on in Revelation 14, chapter 2, it says, "I heard a voice from heaven, and a voice of many waters, and a voice of great thunder, and I heard a voice of harpers harping with harps." Well, in the celestial heavens, lyra is a harp, and lyra has stars saying, "He shall be exalted," also to springing up or ascending as praise. And it goes on, it says, "They sang as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders." And we're having to try to understand what's going on here. Well, apparently the new song is going to be the song of Moses, as it continues that these people are going to know the song of Moses as we're going on with the book of Revelation. The harps and the harping, well, there's also a song here that would probably be involved as well, and that would be the King David's harp song, talking about those who will play on the 10-stringed harp. So we're looking here at probably, as we're ending the war, that we're looking at an event where the people are going to be praising God, and they're going to be using harps. And why would they be dealing with harps, and why would they have to have 10-stringed harps and going to a war? Well, that has to do with the writings of King David. King David's purpose was to explain the vision of Jacob, and that vision is still a mystery, but it is the vision that is going to save Israel, and the vision is like a sealed book, it says. It talks about the face of Jacob. Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as potter's clay. It's talking about the face. It is the face of Jacob, that Jacob shall not now be ashamed. And it's talking about this vision that you're supposed to see within the celestial heavens. The vision is Jacob's vision of the angels ascending and descending, but within the 1-2 war scroll it said the dumb will sing to teach the feeble hands for war. And that is this dumb idol or this image in Jerusalem. When we obey the words of Isaiah, it says, "Surely your turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as potter's clay. Shall the thing framed say of he who made it, thou hast not done this?" And said, "The face of Jacob will not wax pale." It tells you it would be like a necromancer out of the ground, like Jacob himself singing this story. And the songs that he has to sing all have to do with King David. King David's psalms were all given by the unction of God, and a number of them are found by the Dead Sea. These are the information that was sealed up until the time of the end, and that information that was sealed up until the time of the end is supposed to be opened now. By putting together King David's testimony in the Song of the Sabbath Sacrifices, the Thanksgiving hymns, along with the 1-2 war scroll, which we don't know for sure King David wrote it. It dates back to about the time of Jesus, some say the teacher of righteousness, wrote it, and we have to suspect that Jesus was the teacher of righteousness, as when he was baptized, John said, "Thus it is to fulfill all righteousness." And also Enoch had talked about that the elect would come to live with the elect. These were the people who were called the elect. They were called the meek, and they were called the poor, and Jesus had a lot to say about them. And as Jesus finished being baptized, the people who were with John the Baptist was lived in the Judean desert, and yet he had people with him, so we assumed that they would have been from the Qumran community. And they asked him, "Where do you live?" They called him teacher and said, "Where do you live?" So here we have the man who was found to be the teacher, and there's a strong reason to believe that he was the one who was the teacher of righteousness. And if the 1QM War Scroll was written by the teacher of righteousness, that would have been Jesus. Whoever wrote it understood what King David was saying of the Song of Sabbath Sacrifices, of the Thanksgiving hymns. The 1QM War Scroll says, "The dumb shall sing to teach the feeble hands for war." And so we understand that when it's talking about in the Song of the Sabbath Sacrifices, it says, "They shall be judged, and they shall not come to the committee without those who provide plans and knowledge of the utterly holy. Light and insight, the war of the godlike in the blank," it's missing text, removing blank. And it says, "Surely the weapons of warfare belong to the God of the divine beings. The armies of heaven, the wonders of all the divine spirits shall run at his command, while the voice of the tumult, blank, with his might, armies of the divine spirits in the war in the clouds." We have to understand that the 1QM War Scroll is addressed to those who are learned in statutes, who hear the voice and see the angels. And these angels are part of a story that's going to have to do with the war. God was called Lord of Hosts. That meant stars as well as angels. And the heavenly hosts in the heaven were angels, and they had something to do with the Jacob's story of ascending and descending, and also the story of an army, a divine army in the heavens. And understanding how that works, this divine army in the heavens will be brought down to the earth, and these people will be following it. Let's take a look at Morals and Dogmas, page 509. It says, "In Hebrew writings, the term heavenly host includes not only the counselors and emissaries of Jehovah, but the celestial luminaries and the stars, imagined in the East to be animated intelligences presiding over human weal and woe, are identified distinctly impersonating messengers or angels who execute the divine decrees and whose prominence in the heaven is in mysterious correspondence and relationship with powers and dominions of the earth. The Elohim originally included not only foreign superstitious forms, but also the host of heaven, which was revealed in poetry to shepherds of the desert, now as an encampment of warriors, now careering in chariots of fire, now as winged messengers, ascending and descending the vault of heaven to communicate the will of God to mankind." The Eternal, says Bereshith Rabbah to Genesis, called forth Abraham and his posterity out of the dominion of the stars. By nature, the Israelite was a servant to the stars and born under the influence, as are the heathen. But by virtue and the law given on Mount Sinai, he became liberated from this degrading servitude. Yet the astrological character is assigned even to Jehovah. He is described as seating on the pinnacle of the universe, leading forth the hosts of heaven, telling them unerringly by name and number. His stars are his suns and his eyes, which run through the whole world, keeping watch over men's deeds. The stars and planets were properly the angels in Pharisaic tradition, as in phraseology of the New Testament. The heavenly host appears as an angelic army divided into regiments and brigades. Now, the morning after the battle, they're supposed to be singing a song. And this is what's happening here, that these people are having harps, and it's after the battle, and that's why they're going to be singing. And part of the song that they would be singing, there's more than one, for the 1QM War Scroll says that they're going to sing, "Blessed is the God of Israel, who guards loving kindness for his covenant and the appointed times of salvation for the people he redeems. He has called those who stumble into wondrous accomplishments, and he has gathered a congregation of nations for annihilation without remnant, in order to raise up in judgment those whose heart has melted, to open a mouth for the dumb to sing God's mighty deeds, and to teach feeble hands for war. So this study has to do with the 7 angels that will go ascending and descending in the vault of heaven to communicate the will of God to mankind. And I can't help but tell you something also, that the high priest 7 days before Yom Kippur would perform a ceremony, and the idea of the ceremony was that that Christ would go where he could go, but the enemy would not be allowed to go, and that his people were going to follow after. And they sang, as it were, a new song before the throne and before the 4 beasts and the elders. And no man could learn the song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which are not defiled with woman, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of God. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of the waters. But what we're seeing in the story that the high priest did, he does an imitation of the pyramid model, which is supposed to be seen first in the heavens and then brought down to the earth. And he actually, in this pyramid model, is doing a story of the first prince, who is supposed to be Orion, that's seen on 2 sides of the heaven. Orion is the one who's in the position of Ophiuchus as a young man and as an old man in his regular pose. And the coming down from heaven is that story that we see within Psalms 118. So what we're hearing on this is 7 days before the priest destined for the services was separated and kept in the temple, and then he goes on to do this. He's offering the red heifer, but he's also doing a ceremony that will have to do with the war as well. It says, first, the priest immersed his whole body. Then he approached the pile of cedar, pine, and fig wood, which was heaped like a pyramid, but having an opening in the middle, looking towards the west. This is the pyramid, that model that he's making on the earth has an opening in the middle, and that opening in the middle is like unto, in the celestial model, the opening of the grotto, which is also the well, and in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it talks about that what they're going to send the armies to the gap, and this is the gap also that we're speaking of here. It says it has an opening of the middle looking towards the west, in which the red heifer was thrust and bound, with its head towards the south and its face towards the west, and the priest standing east of the sacrifice. His face, of course, also turned westward. All this has to do with the position of Orion. That's exactly how he's standing. So he's slaying the sacrifice with his right hand. He caught the blood in his left, and 7 times he dipped his finger in it and sprinkled it towards the most holy place. Well, that we're supposed to be seeing here that the grotto, when the celestial pyramid is laid over properly, it lays over the grotto, and the Pleiades are lined up in the grotto, and there are 7 Pleiades that's supposed to represent the incense altar. The Great Pyramid is a sign and an altar, but the incense altar is made up of Taurus and Aries to be the 4 horns. Their backsides are missing. Aries was called Barazigger, meaning the righteous altar, and the 7 sprinklings that Orion does is supposed to represent the 7 stars that are the Pleiades that would be within the grotto. All this, however, was done opposite the temple on the 7 days before Yom Kippur. The high priest would actually go to the mount that was across from Jerusalem, and there on this mount that was where he would perform this ceremony, and he would be looking towards the temple. It says, then immediately descending, so he's like in the position of Ophiuchus, who's supposed to descend into the pit and raise up in the position of Orion. And the pyramid model supports that because there's a chamber from the pit to the position of Orion. Then he said, as soon as the flames burst forth, the priest, standing outside the pit in which the pile was built, took cedar wood, hyssop, scarlet wool, asking 3 times as he held up each, is this cedar wood? Is this hyssop? Is this scarlet? So as to call memory of everyone to the divine ordinance. Now, these articles are supposed to translate to the metaphysical meaning, and the metaphysical meaning was to go and stop your enemy from following after you, but to allow your loved one to follow after you. And this is important because the tribes of Israel here, as we're going to see, are going to be afterwards, after this war, going on to paradise. The 144,000 will be those who are allowed to go into paradise, but the enemy will not. And this is a very, very interesting thing because we understand that the Muslims believe that when they come to fight Israel, that they are going to wind up going to paradise. And this is saying, no, they are not going to be the ones who will go to paradise, but instead the tribes of Israel will be the ones who will go out to paradise. So all of this has to do that Orion immerses his body. When King David's psalm is stated, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is talking about the chief who is at the top, who will descend into the pit, and then he will raise up, which would be in the position of Orion. And when it says it's wonderful to our eyes, celestially he descends to the star Myra, meaning wonderful, and then raises up to the Pleiades, which are called the little eyes. Taurus is called a red heifer. He can be an ox or a heifer. So Taurus is a position of the red heifer who was thrust and bound with his head towards the south. Orion is in the position of the priest standing to the east of the sacrifice, his face, of course, also turned westward. So all of these things have to do with the story that has to do with the killing of the red heifer, and the Taurus was supposed to be considered the red ox. He was also the beast who comes out of the sea, and to be the image in the book of Revelation to let us know that he was supposed to be likened to this Antichrist who's going to come in this war. He is the blind. Samuel, another name for Satan, means the blind, who will lead the blind onto the pit, and eventually he will wind up in the pit, but not during this war. So it goes on, it says, and they sang in Revelation 14 verse 3, and they sang as it were a new song before the throne and before the 4 beasts and the elders. Celestially we see a king surrounded by a lion, ox, eagle, and man. Those are the 4 beasts in Revelation. And the elders, deacons, there are 36 deacons in the celestial heavens, upper heavens, 36 in the lower heavens, and so they are the elders. So we are supposed to see this war within the heavens, and it's also supposed to have a relationship that goes on to the earth. It says, these are they which are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. This does not mean that they've never had sex. It means that when they will be going to paradise, they will be celibate. Goes on and says, these are they which follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. And so these are the ones that are the symbol of the virgin, of course, is in the heavens is Virgo, and the symbol of the redeemed among men and the free fruits is the ship Argo, and Argo was supposed to have followed Jason, but as Bullinger pointed out, Jason would have been Jehovah's son. So that's what we're looking at here. It says, in their mouth was no guile, for they were without fault before the throne of God. And in the heavens, what we're seeing is this Argo. It says, the possession of him who cometh is the name of the one star, Canopus, which means the possession of him that cometh. Sophina means the multitude or the abundance. Asmodiska, the released who travel. This will be those who will come to fight to this war that we saw talked about first in Revelation 11, that they will fight those who come to destroy the earth after they see the ark in the heavens and the meaning thereof. Revelation 14:6. I saw another angel fly in the midst of the heaven, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to him. And Cygnus, the swan, is supposed to be the one that's supposed to be representing this. It flies in the midst of the heaven. It's a bird, so it flies, and it has stars that are supposed to be saying these things as well. It goes on, for the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. Cygnus has within it stars that form a glorious cross. And so they're talking about the one who is the one who died upon the cross. And the stars, Albearo means flying quickly, so he flies in the heaven. The Phage means glorious shining forth, so we see that as well. And Deneb Adij means the judgment in the tail, so that he is the one proclaiming judgment. And then it says, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made the nations drink of the wine and the wrath of her fornication. We will expect that Babylon will go down burning into the Euphrates, as Scripture tells us. And celestially we see that Cassiopeia not only can stand as the bride of Christ, but also all of these symbols can have an evil sign as well. So Cassiopeia would also stand as the image of Babylon, the great harlot within the heavens, and she falls down at different times. She lays down, so that's the harlot that would fall down. But she, in this case, would be representing Babylon.